the Bain Free Radio Hour.
Hello and welcome to the Bain Free Radio Hour. Sean Hazlett sits down today with David Weber and Thomas Pope to discuss the Honor Harrington universe and their various collaborations in it. Then later we have more One Jump Ahead by Mark L. Van Name.
Welcome. I'm here with the Bain Free Radio Hour podcast. I'm here with David Weber and Thomas Pope, and we are here today to talk all things Honorverse. None of us know where this is going to go, but it's going to go somewhere, and it's going to be interesting.
We're just going to find out.
For sure. All right. So, David, lots of chaos right now that you're working through. So.
Oh yeah. Well, my work environment for the last 2 years has been just plain shot to hell. We are, if the current schedule holds, we will finish the Hurricane Helene repairs 1 week and 4 days short of the second anniversary of the hurricane. And so far, nothing has happened on schedule. As I was telling you before the interview, I am sitting here in 90-degree heat with no central air in the house because of the asbestos abatement. I do have some cool air coming in from the sunroom, but if I suddenly just fall over out of the screen, you will know that it was heat prostration that caught up with me. But all of this has just played merry hell with any kind of a regular writing schedule. And that is one reason why we are, it's maybe the sole reason we are as far behind on various projects as we are. Tom has been taking up a lot of the slack, but he's been in the middle of interstate moves and everything going on as well.
Yeah.
So we are deeply committed to the Honorverse, and we are going to get it right, but it is not going as quickly as either of us would prefer.
Yeah.
That actually raises a great segue. So you're talking about a lot of projects that you're currently working on, despite battlefield, near battlefield conditions.
And,
working through the chaos and friction. But what are those projects, and how are they? I mean,
I have so many projects log jammed right now. Poor Chuck Gannon is still waiting for me to get him what I need to get him for the next Kane Riordan book, and that delay is on me and the house and other stuff. It's definitely not on Chuck. Tom and I are trying to get a call to deception back to Tim Zahn because we know we missed the drop date, and again, that's on me more than anybody else because of the way things have been going on. And Jane Lindskold is doing her part of the next, or beginning on her part of the next Kingdom novel. And I need to get to that as soon as I can. Let's see. Tony wants the sequel to Sword of the South. That other publisher wants the sequel, wants the next Armageddon Inheritance Safehold book. Marisa and I are supposed to be beginning very shortly work on the next book in the Crown of Slaves series. She is taking over Eric's role in that. And let's see. There's more stuff, I'm sure, because I am a good 18 months to 2 years behind on my delivery schedule. And some of it's been health. I had hip replacement surgery the day before my 74th birthday. That was fun. Sharon has been having health issues that we've had to deal with. So there's been a lot of extenuating circumstances, although I'm not sure there have been any excuses for where we are. It's an unusual place for me to be, but since, let's see, the first concussion, COVID, the second concussion, my writing output, and I don't know how much of this is also due to the sheer chaos of my work environment. but my output is substantially down. What I'm getting done is, I think, as good as anything I've ever done. I'm just not getting the word count that I am accustomed to getting. And I have so many series and whatnot out there that they concertina. When you get behind on one, then all of a sudden you're getting behind on all the others as well. I know there are a lot of readers who are like, where the heck is he? And the answer is sitting in his non-central air conditioning house, hoping that within the next few months, they will get the repairs finished, my work environment will steady, and I'll be able to actually get more work done.
David and I have also been talking a lot about how I can help lay some of the groundwork for a lot of this, in the Honorverse at least. So Marisa and I have been talking, and David and Jacob, we've all been talking about like what the future of the Honorverse looks like, and a lot of that groundwork lays the foundation we need for the next, the next Crown of Slaves book.
Go ahead, Tom.
We've been also talking about possibly setting up a bridging anthology, sort of the where are we now in the Honorverse as we fast forward about 20-ish years. And so there's a lot of work going on behind the scenes to get all of that established. And so Marisa and I have had a lot of conversations about where her parts of the story are going, about what she wants to do with new characters, old characters, and of course a lot of technology, and where does the ships go, where does the political situation go in a time of turmoil.
And we're going to be, when Marisa and I jump back into Crown of Slaves, we're going to be dealing with Raoul as an adult, Raoul Alexander Harrington, as an adult, as an officer, in a leadership position, although we haven't decided exactly how high up the tree he's going to be. We think we know where we want to put him, but I don't know if you're familiar with the way I work, but all things are subject to change, as Tom knows. One of the questions that Tom and I have been kicking around here over the last 48 hours or so is, does Raoul convert is Raoul a member of the Church of Humanity Unchained, or is he a First Stellar like his mother? Which gets to the question of, does Honor eventually convert or become a member of the Church of Humanity Unchained? And spoiler alert time, I've always kind of thought that she would eventually. There's nothing in the Church of Humanity Unchained that she disagrees with. She deeply respects the depth of the Grayson's faith. She knows a lot of members of the Church of Humanity Unchained who she has no question about their spirituality and where they're going. In a lot of ways, the main reason she hasn't converted already, although I don't think I've ever brought this front and center in the books, is you may have noticed she can be a tad stubborn. And she has made her position of, I am not a member of the Church of Humanity Unchained, but I deeply respect it, clear. And if she converts, she is going to want to be absolutely dead certain sure that it's not Henry saying Paris is worth a mass, that her people understand that it is a genuine conversion and not this is politically expedient, especially with my son, with the off-world parent who is going to become stadtholder after me, if you see what I'm saying. So, I will confess that I set the conversation between her and Clinkscale's widows at Clinkscale's funeral up as the emotional hook that I would come back to at the time that she announced her conversion. And it may be that this would be a story for the bridging anthology that Tom was talking about, so that it's a done deal by the time Raoul takes the stage, if you follow me. One
of the challenges we have is that so much is going to change over 20 years that we won't be able to cover it all. And so figuring out how we want to talk about this and how we tell stories that allude to the big changes without just kind of going in depth into all of them, because we don't have time. And establish, where those changes are and how they affect the people around, the people in the universe.
I have actually toyed with the notion of one of the entries in the anthology being a historical perspective look back at the last 25 years by a historian of Manticore or Grayson or whatever, who is basically contemporaneous with the point at which we pick the story back up, and who is it's like maybe or maybe somebody further in the future, and I stick it all into a chapter of a biography of the salamander, kind of thing, and that would let me do a data dump that wouldn't be a data dump, if you follow me.
Yep.
And that might be one way. And that could be fairly short, so it wouldn't be my only contribution to the anthology. But working with Tim and Jacob and Marisa, I think we could do a pretty concise touch on the major points, and wrap and go from there. One of the things that I've known for the last book and a half, how I wanted the Masons to intrude back into the light again, the alignment, and excuse me. I'm looking forward to writing that section in the book with Marisa, because obviously something's going to have to start them looking again. Now, I will say that given Honor Harrington's mindset and Elizabeth's mindset and Pritchard's mindset, they have not automatically signed off on, we found the last vampire and put a stake through its heart, even though it looks like they have, if you follow me. But it's still, even for Honor, you're thinking after 25 years, not a peep out of them, okay, we got them. And then you're going to find out, no, we didn't get them.
Yep.
Curse you, David Weber, kind of thing. But yeah, that kind of is going to work itself out as we get into the story. A lot of stuff tends to do that, especially the way that I write. Tom knows all about that. he's seen it happen. It's kind of like I have an ooh shiny moment and everything is off to the races again. I'm not having as many of those ooh shiny moments as more, you get more age on the computer here, but it's still a story that a universe that engages me deeply. And stress is helping me not get the writing done, and not getting the writing done is helping drive the stress, if that makes sense. It's a feedback loop. And that's why
it's the worst kind of feedback loop, positive feedback.
Yes.
Oh, absolutely. And that's why I'm hoping that sometime real soon now, as we say down here, they'll have me back. I'm not allowed to put my office back where it was before the hurricane. It was, I had my own little separate office building. It was on the other side of the swimming pool. And when the trees fell, 2 of them landed directly on the office, totally demolished it, demolished a bunch of my library, took out. I am finally safe from Tony, because I had a file cabinet drawer here with like 300 or 400 short stories in it that I had written more as exercises than with any, I was working on a particular concept or plot hook, and I never intended for them to publish. And I mentioned them to Tony one time, and she said, "Never?" And I said, "No, never." And she said, "You won't live forever, David." So I was like, okay, I need to get a paper shredder. But the hurricane took care of that for me quite nicely. But when we were talking, I was talking to my daughter Morgan about what we were going to do with the repairs, and she said, "Well, you can't put your office back out there, Dad." And I said, "Why not?" And she said, "Because you have to walk around the swimming pool on the cement." I said, "Yeah." And she said, "Well, when it rains, it gets slippery. When it freezes, it gets slick." And I said, "Are you saying that I can't walk from here to my office safely?" And she said, "When it rains, it gets slippery. When it freezes, it gets slick." So her sister Megan, who just got married, is standing there. She's nodding. Yep, right, okay. So I went to Sharon and I said, "The girls say I can't put my office back out there because when it rains, it gets slippery. When it freezes, it." She said, "Sounds good to me." And I said, wait a minute. So I called Tony. And I said, "Tony, I need to put my office back so I have my writer's hole that I can go to." And Megan and Morgan said, "I can't because when it rains, it gets slippery. When it freezes, it gets slick." And Tony says, "Sounds good to me." So the monstrous regiment of women has triumphed, and we're going to put me into the rebuilt sunroom so I can look out mournfully across the swimming pool to where my office used to be, but I'm not allowed to go anymore, And I'm like, once upon a time, I got a vote. They're like, no, we all love you. We don't want anything to happen to you. And I'm like, I'm glad you love me, but I really want my office back. But I'm not getting it back.
Have you thought about building like a wooden path?
Well, there almost sort of is one with the deck, but I still have to cross cement to get to it. Okay, with the kids out of the house and the repairs finally done, I think it'll actually be a good working environment. Okay, and I have to confess I'm walking with a cane all the time now, which is puzzling because we did the hip replacement, so I wouldn't do that anymore. But I found out a few things. I've given Sharon, who's had 37 surgeries, I've given her grief for years over her pain clock being broken. On a scale of 1 to 10, what's your pain? And she says 2, and I say 5, kind of thing, because she lives in constant pain. So it's accurate. It's a relative scale. So what she says is accurate for her. Well, we have discovered that apparently I was doing exactly the same thing with this left hip for at least 2, 3, 4 years. And not realizing how much I was favoring and everything else. So after we replaced it, all of a sudden I'm realizing, I can't really put my weight evenly on my 2 feet because my back, my shoulders, my hips, they're all programmed to go the other way to relieve the weight on that hip. When they showed me the x-ray, the round part at the top of my hip in the joint was flat on one side, completely flat. And that's what I'd been walking on, obviously, for quite some time to get it into that shape. So I'm pretty sure that what I'm dealing with here is my body saying, "You know what? You programmed me for years to walk this way. And you can't just come in here and change the ground rules now," kind of thing. But like a lot of other things in life, it is what it is, and you just have to deal with it. The one thing that I do know is that I need to not get into the habit of using like a scooter all the time or something like that. I was using one at LibertyCon last weekend, but that's largely because of how big the convention center was.
Yeah.
Okay. But I guess it's really true that I'm not 30 anymore. I mean, it's a hard thing to. I remember talking to my neurologist. This was several years ago when we thought I was passing out at my desk. And it turned out that what I was doing was I was coming to at my desk. I wasn't noticing when I passed out. I was noticing when I came to and jerked up. And fortunately, that didn't happen to me while I was driving, while we were thinking about all this. But he he tried everything. He did test everything. And finally, he pulled the record on my CPAP, and he found that I had been getting like less than 4 hours of sleep a night for like a long time. And he said, David, you can't be doing that. You're not 30 anymore. You're not 40 anymore. You're not 50 anymore. Hell, you're not even 60. I said, okay, I got the point, kind of thing.
Right.
And Sharon is sitting there the whole time going, yep, and I'm like, oh, shut up. But yeah, and somehow we have drifted far, far away from the Honorverse.
I don't know how that happened.
I have no idea.
That's okay. It's still interesting.
It's obviously Sean's fault. Okay, we'll blame him.
My fault.
Okay.
Absolutely. Get back in gear.
Right. Okay, the Honorverse. I originally only projected about 6 books, and like things have a tendency to do when I get involved in them, they growed. Okay. I actually had anticipated it being Raoul who delivered the terms to the Solarian League because his mom had died in At All Costs. Okay. So obviously that went out the window. And I can't say that I regret that at all. Okay. I spent a lot of time with Honor, and I'm pretty sure that I am at least as in love with her as any of the readers are. I've seen her through a lot of crappy things that an uncaring fate, certainly not a benevolent author, did to her along the way. And she is moving steadily into the area, I think, of very important supporting character rather than protagonist in future books. That may not be true in all the short stories that may be being done going forward, but she can still be a mover and a shaker and a strategist and all of that stuff. But other people are going to have to be out there doing the things that Commander Harrington and Captain Harrington were doing in the earlier books, and that's probably going to be very much the central focus of anything going forward.
And it's been important for us to really talk about like the evolution of Manticore and the Alliance and the Navy in such a way so that we don't set things up where honor is just the hammer that you reach for whenever you need to pound the nail in.
Yeah. Well, and one thing that we haven't done a whole lot with that Tom and I do need to begin doing something with sometime in the not too distant future is what happens in the Talbot Quadrant.
Yes.
And in Silesia over that same 25-year period.
Yep.
I think I'd have to go back and look at the terms of the annexation. I think at 25 years, we're getting close to where the Talbot Quadrant's percentage of parliamentary ministers to the imperial parliament has just taken its first increment upward.
Yep.
So that would be a good place to go. And we've got some characters in here that some readers are going to say, yeah, I saw that coming. And other readers are going to say, oh my God, they married who? In the intervening few years. And
I do have a lot of the groundwork laid for Talbot and Silesia, and some of the notes that we need to look over, just to sort of figure out like what they're going to look like from a political situation, what their military situation looks like, how that integrates, how the quadrant guards integrate with the Navy and the other forces.
Tom is really good at identifying points at which there would be change. Okay, and then it's a question of all of us, but especially me and Tom, sitting down and deciding how those change points would play out, and trying to keep in mind everything we've already done when we get into now wait well, we just said this was going to happen over there, so that can't happen over here because sort of thing. Now the other thing that we have to be careful about is not to paint ourselves too firmly into a corner by trying to tell the reader, yes, we have now told you everything that changed. So if we realize that there was a necessary change that must have occurred and we didn't tell you about it, you're like, oh, okay, you're going back, you're reinventing your backstory here. We've got the screenshots to prove that
Right.
know.
Yeah, I mean, it's my I've the pressure I feel is that I think we need to know all of the major changes, many of the minor changes. We need to express the important ones to the reader and then leave enough space to, for the author to have better ideas somewhere down the line, because that's important too.
Yeah, and it's especially important to me and it has been in collaborations from the get-go, in the Honorverse or anywhere else, that my collaborating author have freedom to suggest changes, alternative approaches, or even I just realized that there's a plot hole here, David, and here's how I think we should fill it, kind of thing, rather than me saying, okay, here's the synopsis of the story I want you to write. You don't get your best work out of somebody if that's what you tell them. Even if you're working on a novel together, you may send them a synopsis and say, this is how I think we might approach this, and then they interject their own notes. Jane and I do this all the time. It's like I'm in control of the base course of the books, but we talk about different ways to approach situations in it. And as senior partner, if you reach a point where it's fish or cut bait time, and you just, there's not a smooth compromise situation, you have to either say, okay, we'll do it your way, or no, we're going to have to do it my way because of how it fits into the entire series. One thing that bugs Jane, and I understand why, is the fact that the practice in the Star Kingdom for married couples is normally that the wife takes the husband's surname. Okay. And unfortunately, that is baked into the DNA of the series, going all the way back to the point at which Stephanie's husband takes her surname, so that there will, quote, always be Harringtons, close quotes, on Sphinx. Okay. And it bugs Jane, and I don't blame her. And if you'll notice, I have a whole bunch of other star systems where that is not the rule, where you see hyphenated surnames, or you see married couples who have different surnames, etc. It's just part of the mix in Manticore and Grayson. Okay. Now, one thing that in the Manticore and Peerage, okay, you will frequently see hyphenated surnames. And in that case, they're hyphenated on the basis of whose title has precedence over whose. So it's Alexander, it's Alexander Harrington, because Harrington is the weightier of the two titles. If Honor had still been Countess Harrington when she married Hamish, technically they're equal peerages, but obviously his is much older. So in that case, instead of being Alexander Harrington, it would have been Harrington Alexander for their surnames. Okay. And that's something that I baked into the Star Kingdom back when I built it. Now Tom has to deal with the fact that there are things that I baked into the Star Kingdom back when I built it that I didn't get around to writing down for anybody else. Okay. It's kind of like, well, how is that you put it, Tom? It's like you ask me a question and it turns out that I have an answer to it. Okay. It just never occurred to me to tell anybody.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and sometimes I'm kind of refereeing an argument between you and yourself. I'm like, David, it's like, I get that that's what you had in your head, but this is what you wrote in the book. So.
Well, but we can fix that by, it's kind of, it's, in some ways where the Honorverse now is. Once upon a time, it was pretty much my sole property. And then we started doing the anthologies. And what most of the short stories, not all of them, because a couple, especially of the earlier ones, were not really zoned in on the Honorverse. They're not canonical. Almost all of the other short fiction becomes canonical. And so there are aspects of the Honorverse that have been, where the harmony has been filled by other voices that I didn't know were coming along when I built the Honorverse. Okay. And I think that's been a strength for the franchise as a whole. But it has also created some of the holes that Tom is finding. Because like, well, yes, I knew that this happened, but I had figured on it happening a different way. And because of the short story X, it can't happen that way. So it has to happen another way. Okay. That the grossest example of that, and I don't mean gross as in ick, I mean as in the largest example of that, is Eric's pulling the entire storyline forward 20 years in his From the Highlands and that whole thing, which is why Honor didn't get killed. I think most readers think that that was a good thing. Okay. I would have handled her death in a way that I think most of the readers would have forgiven me for eventually within 10 years of my death. There wouldn't have been a dry eye in the house, including mine. If you remember the first Romancing the Stone movie, where Kathleen Turner finishes the book and she says, "God, that's good." Okay, the screenwriter knew what the hell he was talking about in that scene, because sometimes that's what you hit at the end of the book, or even just a single scene going through. I think of Clinkscale's funeral as one of those moments, now the reader would have found out that Honor was dead exactly the way that the reader found out that Alistair was dead. You would have thought she was alive but wounded on her ship, on her flag deck, and you would have found out when Alistair came through with the ships and won the battle. Okay, he would have calmed Invictus, and Rafe Cardones would have had to tell him, with tears running down his face, she didn't get out. And that's pretty much how the reader would have found out that she was dead. And oh boy, the people who were pissed with me over blowing up the space station with Hamish on board, they would have been really pissed with me under that circumstance. But like I said, I think they would have forgiven me ultimately. Maybe, but when Eric said, what's something that a Manticoran and a Havenite secret agent could agree on, I was like, oh well, there's only one thing. And of course, unfortunately, that was poking the Mason alignment more above the radar horizon than I'd had in mind. But that's why the Shadow of Saganami wasn't the beginning. The Shadow of Saganami was actually intended to be the first of the post-Honor novels written before she was dead. If you see what I'm saying, the storyline would have continued through the Talbot Quadrant, and that's where the junior officers who are going to become the senior officers, that's why I introduced all those midshipmen. That was originally where that was going. And so it would have been a continuation of the mainstream, if you will, series, with Avars Terekhov kind of in the Honor Harrington role as the mentor for a lot of these junior officers and so forth. And now those books will never be written the way that I had intended to write them, because of the fact that and the other thing that happened was the Solarian League was supposed to have another 25 years to get a clue before they went up against the Alliance. and trying to generate suitable tension when one side can shoot the other side from twice the second side's range was a challenge. And it accounts for some of the change in focus of the action in the there's not anything in the shadow books that wouldn't have been there anyway. Okay, because one of the things they were supposed to do was to show the difficulty of Manticore integrating these societies, these cultures, and interacting with the fringe and the Office of Frontier Security, leading up to the final emergence of the alignment. And in an alternate universe somewhere, those books undoubtedly exist, just not in this one. It's kind of one of those things that remind the author that, yes, you may be God in your universe, okay, but trust me, not in your own. Somewhere there is an author who is writing this series, okay, who's saying, yeah, Dave, I got plans for you, Jack, but I digress.
Not that you don't have a billion other projects to do, but have you ever considered doing like that parallel universe? Like you have some sort of dimensional slip and then
No. Don't even say that.
Thomas just saw like
to keep track of what is
hours added to his plate with one question.
I really should post how the Safehold series won't end on Bane, because it's what what happens is that the Gibaba are closing in for the kill when they're suddenly hit from behind by a fleet of planetoids from the Fourth Empire, and they have Tomanate class troop transports, and all that kind of thing, and it's bringing it all together. Is like, yes, we've been fighting the Ocultoni, only you call them the Gibaba, for a long time now, kind of thing. We're now chasing them down across the parallel universes, blah, 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 blah. Yeah, there's a part of me that would like to write, how these books might have been written, but okay, I have an entire series of historical novels that begins with the American Revolution and ends with Desert Storm, following an American naval dynasty that I've got sitting over here in a corner that I will never get the opportunity to write because people want Honor Harrington books. They want Safehold books. They want Norfresa books, which I understand and which deeply gratifies me. But you have to make choices. And one of the choices means that those books that would be very near and dear to my heart are never going to be written. Somebody once, actually more than one person, have suggested that the solution to my all the books that I have in the air is to get me, a couple of pikas from the Safehold books and set them to work writing. Okay. And my response is that they just start spinning off series of their own. I mean, it wouldn't solve the problem. It's the it's the way that his head works. And historically, that's been a better problem for me to have than the one that I'm having right now, where I'm being prevented from working. Having more things to do than you have time to do them in is usually a good thing for an author, rather than having there's a deadline on this book and I haven't figured out how it's going to go. Okay, that's not the problem really that I've ever had. And what I'm having now is not a case of not knowing where the book is going to go, but a case of finding the time and the sanity to get it there. If you see what I'm saying. Yeah, the idea in part of doing the collaborations was to bring additional hands on deck. It was not envisioned when I was doing it that, yes, I can bring the hands on deck, but if the captain is in his cabin below, the ship's still not going anywhere, if you see what I'm saying. And there's been too much of that here in the last couple of years. And my GP told me, you have long duration COVID. And I said, nonsense. I don't know. My cardiologist told me, you have long duration COVID. I said, nah, no way. My neurologist told me, you have long duration COVID. I'm like, okay, fine, And that has definitely, I think, been an element in where I am. I don't have the kind of brain fog that a lot of people talk about, but I do have more difficulty hearing myself when I sit down to write than I did. All right. It's very seldom when I'm writing a scene, okay, I generally don't know how that scene is going to work until I've written it. All right, I know where the scene fits into the overall flow of the manuscript. I know what the scene needs to accomplish in terms of pushing the story forward. But exactly how am I going to make it work? Who's going to say what? Who's going to do what? Okay, I don't know that when I start, but it just sort of flows automatically while I'm writing. Okay, the problem that I've had is getting that flow started. All right, I can be sitting there and realize, you know what, you've been looking at that computer screen for 25 minutes and you haven't written anything. And then once I get the first sentence written, the pump's been primed and the flow is there. And I have been told by my neurologist that that is an artifact of my COVID and concussions combined. He has determined that I had at least 3 and probably 4 concussions, and he personally got to navigate 2 of them with me, so we know about those. But it's been. I think God is basically telling me I should have taken better care of my things. Okay, it's like you're gonna fall on your face on a cement floor. Yeah, that's not what I gave you a sense of balance for, boy. So I think I'll just take that away since you're not using it.
One of the things that I've been trying to do as we've been working closely together and Call to Deception over the last few months is trying to figure out how I can prime that pump. And so a lot of it is sort of pulling out like, okay, here's a plot thread. Like I don't want to just, I'm not throwing the entire manuscript to David and saying, David, fix this, or like, add your bits. But instead it's like, here's a plot thread on Jeremiah Lin. Here's a plot thread on this battle. Here's a plot thread on this diplomatic scene or something like that.
Yeah.
And I think that seems to be helping in that at least we can take it into smaller pieces. But there will be a point where we have to, I'm doing all the final assembly and then final edit or markup pass, and then I'll hand it to David to look over everything, and then it all goes back to Tim for his pass.
Tom is being even more our central clearinghouse on this one than he was on the earlier books. Now, one of the things you have to understand is that the reason that I approached him with this series in the first place was because I wanted these books to have a distinctly different voice from the Honor Harrington era books. And I also wanted the technology to be significantly different. And I didn't really trust myself to make the technology sufficiently cruder, if you see what I'm saying. Because I have such, okay, this is how Honorverse tech works. And I would have been, I think, overly inclined to push fine control elements further into the past than was suitable. So Tom has been in charge more than anybody else of delineating the difference in the technology systems that are available. And I am standing back and letting Tim and Tom do the rough draft with minimum or no input from me, except what we've discussed before the draft begins. And it's understood that I'm going to be writing the tactical scenes and most of the critical movement of starships and whatnot. And that's the point at which I stick my oar in, and I may say, okay, I think we need another scene here that does this from what they've done. But by and large, I try to respect the work they've already put into it, unless there is a significant problem in terms of continuity, or one of those things that I know about the Honorverse that I didn't get around to telling Tom. There are fewer of those than there used to be, because we've been working on this for years now. I realized several books ago that it was like, I can't remember exactly how that missile works. So I call Tom and say, Tom, how does the Mark 23 work? And he pulls up the file and says, well, the way it works, Dave, is, and that is a huge relief for me. I did my best to avoid continuity errors in the books. There are a couple. For example, Damien Harahap is in two places at once, if you read the books closely. And I'm like, shucky dogs, when I was going back through and rereading the earlier book where that happens. But Tom is really good about spotting conflicts between what's already been published and what I'm thinking at that moment. And he's actually, he doesn't even have to whack my knuckles with a ruler anymore, but
much
Tom,
more gentle than that.
Yeah, well, Tom is now about 25 minutes from the hurricane damaged house. And that, I think, is helping quite a bit, because we cannot simply send, text back and forth and files back and forth. We can actually sit down over dinner, which we do most Fridays, to discuss where we are on the book and where it's going. And I think that's been beneficial too. I know it's been beneficial. Excuse me. It's been beneficial to me in my sense that we are moving forward in the correct direction. The sense that control has been reexerted over where this process is, and the lack of that sort of internal focus has been a big part of where I've been because of the house and everything else. It's kind of like, juggling live hand grenades. All right. You got to keep them all in the air, or it's really going to be bad. And that tends to prevent you from focusing properly on any one of the grenades and saying, oh, that one still has a pin in it, But I think that the Honorverse going forward from me, and I mean that as in post me, okay, is likely going to be but it's going to be significantly different from where I would have taken it if I had still been stalwartly at the wheel, my eyes fixed on the distant horizon kind of thing. But I feel confident that it's going to be in very good hands that respect the material and that fully understand where I was coming from when I created it, and what strands have made it succeed, and which strands could have been tuned better in my part of it. And that's one reason why I want to get, for example, Marisa involved in the Crown of Slaves thread. I want their DNA to be injected into the series voice before my voice has to be left out. Okay. The thing that I think really kills a successful series when the original author dies is that the person they bring in doesn't speak in the same voice to the readers. and either you get a very abrupt transition in voice, which is going to lose most of your readers because it's really the voice of the series that they've been following all this time, or else they attempt to replicate the original author's voice. And 9 times out of 10, what you get is a pastiche, not a live book going forward. Okay. And I've been trying to find writers who are willing to put up with me while I'm still here, that I can get involved in the process so that they've had a chance to be exposed to my voice in the writing process and take that into consideration, but also so that their voice can be integrated into the Honorverse harmony, if you will, going forward. And I'm trying to find the best solution that I can for a series, a universe that I had not anticipated taking on the degree of life of its own that it has, to continue for people who love it, even if I'm not here to be part of its ongoing evolution. Okay. And that sounds, I've been trying to decide if that sounds immodest. Okay. And, modesty has never been one of my flaws going forward. But it's important to me. I don't think that I'm going to be able to, I know I'm not going to be able to finish all the projects that I want to finish. And trying to find someone else who can finish it, or at least sustain it, continue it, is important to me, if that makes sense.
Yeah. How are you systematically thinking through that? Like, how many people are you or have you brought in? How many do you think you'll continue to bring in?
We are looking right now at, counting Tom, at least 3 in the Honorverse. Now, the Safehold books, I very much want to finish myself. Those aren't with Bang; they're with Tor. But because of where those books have been going, I don't really think I can hand them over to anyone else and wrap them up satisfyingly. I am looking very, very closely. As a matter of fact, it's pretty much a done deal at Marisa finishing up the Norfressa novels for me if I'm not here to do it myself. She has a synopsis of the critical elements in the ongoing life of Ken Hoden and Liana and Gwenna and all the others. And I'm comfortable with that. She'll also have some involvement in the Honorverse. Jacob Holo will have some involvement in the Honorverse going forward. So in part, it's which of the authors who have crossed my personal horizon have I focused on? And in part, it's not a case of my going out and saying, boy, I would really like this person who has never written with me as a participant in the ongoing series when I'm not here anymore. It's been more a case of who have I met that I think would be a really good fit for this. You used the word systematically. Okay. Tom will tell you that systematic and David don't necessarily belong in the same sentence.
I do this.
That was an intentional
stuff.
use of a word. That was very intentional. That was to give Tom a chance to opine.
Tom, go for it.
Well, so systematically, the way I see my role in this is I'm trying to make certain that the universe stays consistent, that the universe stays sort of consistent to its roots, and it grows and evolves. That's the thing about the Honorverse that I've always loved, is that it changes, and it changes in reasonable ways, and it grows and changes. And so when we're looking at what happens in 20 years, 30 years, in universe, where we start to tell a new breed of stories, I want to make certain that we have an evolving universe, that what would happen and what has changed. It's not just everybody kind of goes into cryosleep for 20 years and comes back out a little bit older and unchanged. And so it's not just about the technology, it's not just about the any one piece, but I'm looking at all the technology and the politics, and even what the maps look like, and even where the alliances have formed, where they have broken. And David and I spend a lot of time talking about ideas that I have for that, and how things look like they might be going, and then I want to provide the guide rails for authors, Jacob and Marisa, of course, and other authors who have already written in the Honorverse, and even new ones if we have them, to be able to say, this is what the Honorverse is, and this is what this is the piece you want to explore. Let's talk about how we can explore that. Let's talk about what might be happening around that area that we can use to tell your story. And I've been learning as I've been going on as an editor, is how to balance that with letting people tell the narrative that they want to tell. And so, I've had lots of conversations with Tim, especially in the early days, that I regret, because Tim would ask, can I do this? And I was like, no. Can I do this? No. Can I do this? No. Like, we had a lot of these sort of loops back and forth, like, what can I do with this spaceship, Tom? And it was just sort of it just doesn't work that way. And I think it was frustrating for him. And so I was very happy when I could get to the point where he said, well, can we do this? I said, no, but we can do that. And so as I've grown as an editor, I've tried to find ways of balancing the technology, the universe, with the narrative. And so really tried to find ways of understanding what the problem is that the author is trying to solve in this story, or in this this particular part of the narrative. How can we use the universe to solve that? But how can we do that without breaking anything, without creating, like, I never want it to go somewhere where we're creating a new technology that's never been seen before, or a new tactic that's never been seen before, and no one's ever talked to it, and it's just talked about it, and it's just this brilliant thing which is obvious and would be like step one in the tactical manual as soon as they implemented this new technology. I don't want that, and I'm trying very hard to resist that while still leaving enough room for the narrative to grow.
Yeah, one example of that was in one of the second or third Travis Lee novel, where Travis comes up with this brilliant maneuver, and it is brilliant. And the problem is that it is brilliant enough that it would have occurred to somebody 600 years ago, when the technology became available. So what we did is, yes, it's a brilliant idea, and it is so brilliant, it got overused so much that it has completely fallen out of use. Nobody's going to expect it. Now, Travis doesn't know that it's been around for forever, because Manticore doesn't have a navy. So that takes nothing away from his insight in creating the maneuver. But it does allow for the fact that the technology has been around for a long time. One of the things that Tom is doing is finding ways that we can avoid needing to do something like that, to give, I hate the word, but to give agency to the person who has the idea at the time in narrative, while also allowing for the fact that it is a logical use of the technology that almost certainly would have occurred to someone else, somewhere else, possibly long before this utilization of it. And it's actually harder to write novels set in the past of a universe than it is to write novels set in the future of a literary universe, in the sense that you have things that are nailed to the ground. I can't go there because we didn't go there, if you see what I'm saying. And also because you do have the problem of, okay, why don't they continue to use this maneuver in Honor's time?
Right.
If
Or
it,
this
if it,
technology. Yeah.
if it works so well. So that can be, now some people probably wouldn't worry about that as much as Tom and Jacob and Marisa and I do. But one of the hallmarks of the Honorverse is that I have at least attempted to maintain consistency and reasonable paths of evolution for how you got from point A to point B. It's kind of like in Honor of the Queen. Okay, in On Basilisk Station, in Honor of the Queen, you meet an Honor who is not the Honor that you meet in the Short Victorious War. Okay, and that's because that was deliberate on my part. There were parts of her life that she had so firmly compartmentalized that she wasn't thinking about them. I'm not going to go there because they hurt too much. So the Honor that you meet in the first two books, you see her beginning to change and grow. Okay, I knew the character was going to have to change and grow, but I had baked in an element, which was what happened at the academy and how it affected her attitude towards herself and others around her, that I could open up in that book and integrate into this is an ongoing, growing character early in the process. Okay, and then every single thing that's happened to her has led to her evolving into a different person. She's still the same person, but she's a growing, changing person. And I think that's one of the things that attracts readers to her, is the fact that the Honor of, there's a scene somewhere in one of the books where Hamish is realizing that the captain of the list standing in front of him and telling him he's wrong, okay, is not this intensely focused, almost apolitical commander who went to Basilisk Station. Okay, that she's grown, she's become somebody else. She's become, in fact, his peer, even if he continues to outrank her in the Manticoran Navy. She outranks him in the Grayson Navy, but they happen to be in the Manticoran Navy at the moment. And there have been a couple of places in the books where people have suddenly said, whoa, I've been with her for so long, I've been so close to her, I hadn't noticed how she was changing, but boy, she has. When Elizabeth realizes that Honor is right about sending providing Haven with a way to resolve the war with honor and with dignity, and that there's no reason for Eloise Pritchard to have assassinated Webster on Earth or tried to kill Barry on, and that's the point at which Elizabeth realizes on an emotional, on an intellectual level, what she already had accepted. Well, actually, on an emotional level, what she already accepted on an intellectual level, which is that Honor Harrington is her peer. Okay, she's a head of state. She's this third-ranking noble, I think, of the third or fourth-ranking noble of the Manticoran peerage. She's a flag admiral. I mean, she's a fleet admiral. She's all this stuff, but it's happened gradually enough that Elizabeth has just incorporated that into who Honor is. And at this point, she realizes that Honor is the person whose integrity and judgment she probably most respects of anybody in the universe, and that Honor doesn't agree with her. And Elizabeth is able to step back and say, maybe you're right. But the Honor who could tell Elizabeth you're wrong is not the Honor who is having butterflies when she's on her way to King Michael's Tower the first time. Okay. No, that's a different honor you're talking to now. And that's the way that it should be. That's why I have no patience with series in which the protagonists, go through all these earth-shattering experiences and they're still the same person they were when it started.
And I am much stronger when it comes to, systems and mechanics and ships and things like that. But it is telling that a good 50% of my current tech Bible for the 1950s era is people. And where is this person and how have they changed? And some of it is just simply rote, like if they were a lieutenant at this in 1922, they're going to be this this rank or close to this rank in 1950s. But some of it is also like how have they evolved? And we're trying to put, like the guide rails we have for the technology, and like we're trying to build everything out. Where are these people? And a lot of it is driven by narrative, and so there's a lot of openings there. But I want to make certain we don't forget about them. We don't forget about the. It's not just the handful of characters, but there's all of these new junior officers that we've seen kind of scattered throughout the books. They're going to show up. New characters going to show up, and they're going to evolve.
It's kind of like, okay, how much attaché duty did they stick Helen Zilwicki with? Okay, it's not going to be her favorite thing in the universe ever. Who went into ONI? Who went into civilian intelligence? Did Alistair? Senior moment. Did Terekhov go back into the diplomatic service? Or is he still on active duty? I mean, these are decisions that you have to make, and making them before you begin writing is usually a better idea than, oh, what the heck, I think it'd be cool if he blonk. By the same token, you have to be willing to say, well, we'd said that Avars was going back into the diplomatic service, but it would be really cool if he didn't go back in until he did this.
Right.
Okay. And so then if we haven't nailed our feet to the floor in something that's already in print and therefore in canon, we can go back and change our current plans.
What was the general that said plans are useless, but planning is invaluable?
Yes.
Just knowing what we think someone's going to do gives us and reminds us that they're there. It's just there's a cast of literally thousands in these books, and any one of them could show up. No, I mean this is a good thing, and I'm trying to keep track of all of them, so we know like who could show up and who could cross paths, especially if the narrative is not specific to a person, but it's like we need a person like this, and so we can either make a new one or we can say, hey, there's a person like this. They're at about the right rank to do this kind of thing that we need someone to do. So maybe they're the CEO of this ship that's coming by.
Well, the other thing is that the way that I throw named characters into some people get perturbed with me over the number of characters that they think they're supposed to be keeping track of, every bit of the way. My situation is that if a character is going to have a significant role, even if it's just a supporting role in the background in the book, then that character has to be a real person to me and to the other folks in the book. And therefore, that character has a name, which I put into my notes, and at least a little bit of background, about who their physical appearance and who they are and whatnot. And then I go ahead and instead of saying, bring us to our new heading, Lieutenant, and the lieutenant saying, aye, ma'am. It's like, bring us to our new heading, Rafe. And it's like, aye, Cardona said, kind of thing. All right. One of the side effects of that is that I have an incredibly deep bench, and I'm writing military science fiction, which means characters are going to die, including some fairly central and important characters. And the depth of bench that I have means that I can go back to somebody that you already know and who the characters, or at least Honor, already know, so that there's that sense of continuity for the narrative flow as a whole. Um, and I think that's one of the strengths of the way that I tell the stories. I'm sorry if some people are like, "Oh no, not another named character, Dave," But hey, that's the way it is. You got to take the rough with the smooth. But I mean, Rafe Cardones is actually a pretty good example. He could have been gone completely from the novels after Basilisk Station, or Honor of the Queen, and people are saying, okay, fine, Honor has moved on in her life. She's got, but when she needs a flagship captain and she can reach down, and Rafe, who she's known for 20 years and watched grow from this junior grade lieutenant who misprogrammed the reconnaissance drones, in Basilisk Station, I think that it adds enjoyment and a sense of completion and of, these are people who have lives even when we don't see them on the page, center stage. That helps to create the perception of the Honorverse as a genuine alternative universe, not just 3 or 4 novels. If that makes any kind of sense at all. To anybody besides me. I mean, but Sharon has told me that many things that make sense to me don't make sense to grown-ups. I mean, to other people.
No, it adds a sense of verisimilitude and continuity, right? It just seems more real. The characters seem more
definitely
real.
definitely continuity. And I think readers enjoy meeting old friends who have moved on in their lives. Um, um, Rafe is, I'm kind of focused in on him right now as the best example of that, but there are others. Cynthia Lecter, Mike Hinkey's chief of staff in the Shadow books, who was the XO on Nike. Okay, I mean, it's and it gives me a certain pleasure to go back to meet these old friends again myself, because I did create them to be complete characters, whole people, when I stuck them in the first place. I'm like, there you are. That's what you've been up to,
Yeah.
like Iris Babcock. Okay, I promised people for years that they would eventually see the courtship between Horace and Iris. And in Challenges, you do, and it is not the kind of courtship anybody else would have had. But it's very true, I think, to both of those characters. And so now, going forward, if we need to, we've established that relationship. We've established that they're a couple. If we decide that we want to have God Save the Universe, a little Horace running around, we can do that now. Okay.
That's true. That's true. I don't know if that's in my notes or not. Yeah.
Yeah. See, that Tim is like, oh my God.
Oh, yeah.
But see, this conversation alone has just added hours to his to record this or watch this 6 times. How extensive is kind of the Bible for this series?
It's not a Bible. It's about I think the last time I counted, it was about 12,000 different files on a Google Drive. It's about like 24 gigabytes. Some of them are images, some of them are older versions of things. So, but I would say in terms of like my normal working environment is over 1,000 files, and with maybe a couple of dozen spreadsheets that hold sort of, I have sheet of names, sheet of nobles, sheet of stars, sheet of this, sheet of that, various spreadsheets for other things. So it tends to be, instead what I do is I build like mini tech Bibles that are bespoke for what we're doing. So there's a tech Bible for the 1950s. That's covering the bridging anthology, is covering at least the first novel of the continuation. But when we were doing challenges, I made a mini tech Bible for each of the short stories that I was working with the authors on, just to sort of wrap around. Here's what we know about the setting where you are, the system where you are, if we're setting up an embassy, here's what the embassy looks like. We're setting up this, here's what the people look like. Here's the ship specs. So it's more of a collection than anything else. Yeah, go ahead.
Before I wrote the first two novels, I had done a tech Bible for myself that was 65, 80, somewhere in there, 1,000 words. And it was organized into headings like medical tech, in which I would go in and write myself notes about how Prolong worked and how the, and that kind of thing. And for the launch of a series, it was a pretty darn extensive tech Bible, more than most people write. Okay, it is now sort of the core of the coral reef that Tim has been building out, because everything that was some of the stuff that was in the original tech Bible is no longer canonical because I changed my mind while I was writing the books. And one of the things that that Tom and I have had to do, and are still doing a little bit going on, is looking at which iteration of how this works we're looking at. I tried to go into my original tech Bible, and when I made a significant change or a significant addition, like what is the actual time interval for powering up the impeller wedge of a starship? Okay, I inserted that into my original tech Bible in a different colored typeface so that I knew that it was a later edition. All right. And Tom is doing that on a much more organized, I am an IT professional sort of way. I honestly don't believe that the Honorverse in its current format could have been written in a pre-computer age, simply because of all of the bits and pieces and gizmos that have to be kept in line, and that you have to be able to lay your hands on when you need them.
Yeah.
So the ability to go in and do search terms and so forth is incredibly useful. The way Tim has set things up makes that much more effective than when I was opening books and doing a search term through each book in succession until I found the original iteration that I had been trying to be sure I had right. And in terms of a pool of authors continuing a shared universe, being able to establish it in this degree of detail in a central node that can be searched digitally to find what you're looking for. It's an incredible advantage for all the people who didn't have crammed into my brain thoughts about how this was going to work anyway.
Yeah.
It's been a very interesting evolutionary process for me. Eric, many years ago, I'm not sure this was original to him. He was just the first person that I heard say it, and I've said it many times since then. The internet makes collaborations possible in a way that was never possible before. Before computers, if you were going to collaborate, you had to either live like in the same block or the same house, or rely on the postal service to take chapters back and forth. Okay, now I can send, Tom can send me a section of the book where it needs my attention because we need to work out exactly how this maneuver is going to happen and everything else. I can write the section, I can bang it back to him with review comments about, I need a star system name here. I need to, did this character have a last name earlier in the books? And Tom can jump right in there and say, okay, this system is close enough to where you need it to be. We can go with it as a named existing system, or no, we don't actually have one on the map right now, but I can see this as an important enough element. I'll create another star system. I'll put it on the map. It'll be nailed down going forward. and he can send that to me, and I can look at it, and I can make changes and send it back to him with my comments on his comments. Okay, before the internet, that would have taken months, at least weeks. Yeah. Okay, and we can do it in 3 hours.
Yeah, and it updates 3 or 4 files on mine. It updates my master star map. It updates my master system list. I often create a new document for the system itself just to drop in what we already know about it. So the next time we come back there, I can look that up. So yeah, just that one thing is probably three file changes for me, the way I organize things.
Well, and the other thing about it is that we had a sequence in Call to Deception that we were working on that was getting a little complicated about, how do you get these guys deep enough into the hyperlimit that they can't run away? How do you do this? How do you do that? And having a system geography to look at when I was initially planning it, it was like, yeah, okay, and so Tom was like, well, that gas giant doesn't have to be in the orbit I put it in originally. I can just move it, I think it was Jerry Pournell. It was either Jerry or Larry Niven, or maybe they were whoever it was talking about a collaboration. It may have been Mote in God's Eye, but at any rate, they changed the orbital radius of a planet, and they changed it because somebody had looked at a female character and thought she's cold as ice. Okay. And the orbit that they had it in, there would have been effectively no winter on the planet. So they moved it far enough out that it would be logical for somebody on the planet to think about she's cold as ice. Yeah. And so we've been known to do things along the same lines. Like, for example, in this instance, I told Tom, I said, well, this is what I think I need to have happen. And he said, okay, well, we can move the planet here. We can move the relative positions of the two planets in their orbit, kind of thing, and make it work. And that, again, is something that once upon a time would have been extraordinarily difficult to accomplish. And the other thing about it is that it's not a case of, well, okay, I have to make this change, so I'm going to make it in what I'm writing, and then I'm going to mail it to you, and you're going to go like, oh crap, that completely invalidates something over here. Okay, you can IM him. You can pick up the phone and you can say, Tom, I need to do this, and Tom will say, okay, let me take a look, and I'll pop you a file on Messenger as soon as I've got it, worked out.
Yep.
Tom is in many respects the closest collaborator I've ever had. He's certainly the closest collaborator I've ever had who isn't actively writing the story that's going to see print with me, because he's writing the story that he and I are writing the story that is going to see print depends upon. Okay, so it's like Tom is absolutely my creative node where the universe is concerned. All right, I try to make sure that my fellow writers have the freedom to do their best storytelling. Okay, it's kind of like one of the reasons that authors, as a rule, are kept far, far away from cover art, at least until they are very well established. They are treated as little children who know very little about cover art. It's because most of them don't. Okay, but the key thing, the critical thing, I think, where cover art is concerned is something that I learned when I was doing PR. And that is, the more tightly you constrain the artist, the less likely you are to getting the artist's best work. Because the more the artist is straining to make sure that what you've told him or her is faithfully incorporated into the art, the less freedom they feel to do their best work. David Mattingly is oh my God, I was so glad when they basically said, okay, David's going to do the covers for all the Honorverse books going forward. because David has a unique ability to propose a cover and then ask for details that he needs to make sure of, which rank insignia is she wearing, which Navy's uniform is she in for this book. And I think that I was given more access to cover art decisions than a lot of authors earlier, was because Jim and Tony realized that I'd worked with artists for years before I started publishing books. And so I've had more input. Okay, the first three it's like in the first 4 Honorverses, we had 3 different artists. Okay. Well, actually, the first 4, no, actually, the way that really was, the first 4 covers, we had 4 different honors, and only 2 artists had been involved. Okay. David has imposed order on that. His Honor Harrington is not exactly the Honor Harrington that I had envisioned in terms of her features and whatnot. But she works very, very well with the written descriptions of her in the books. And she is consistent from book to book to book. And David understands that things like getting the rank insignia right and so forth are especially important for a protagonist whose career is going to span already like 30 years, but she's a prolong recipient. So she is not going to change physically as much as Protector Benjamin will. Okay. And that's good. And actually, a lot of what Tom is doing is the non-graphic art, non-cover art side of maintaining that same consistency and continuity. And I've been very, very fortunate in both. I was very fortunate in Jim Bain. Jim bought the first 2 Honor Harrington novels simultaneously and brought them out in successive quarters. That at the time was highly unusual. And it did things like establishing for the reader that, yes, there will be more books. And yes, the quality will be consistent between them. Now, it also led to a very, very interesting encounter with Carolyn Cherry in the green room at a convention, because I walked in and I was wearing a T-shirt that had the actually it was a sweatshirt that had the ad for it. Had like the ad from which magazine was this from? Books in Print, I think. Anyway, it was the 2 covers of Basilisk Station and Honor of the Queen, and it was all about, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, and it had by David Weber at the bottom. Okay, and I walked in and Carolyn saw that and she grabbed me. She pulled the sweatshirt out and she says, "You're the one who wrote those books. That is such brilliant marketing to just leave the name off." And it turns out that when the ad actually printed, Bain had left the author's name out of the ad. So here are these 2 new books coming from Bain, and nobody has any clue what the author's name is. And Carolyn was assuming they'd done it on purpose as a teaser. And I'm like, oh, yeah, I thought that was a brilliant ploy as soon as I realized where she was going. But it was one of the more interesting moments of my life, because I was very much a new member of the club, and here was Carolyn Cherry, grabbing me by the front of my sweatshirt. So, and I'm like, "Lady, it wasn't me." But it was a moment. One of the things that has been especially satisfying, gratifying, even those aren't probably the right words to me, are the number of other people that I've met because of the books, because of the cons, because of the professional association. One of the people I most treasured as a friend was Roger Zelazny. And unfortunately, I only knew him for about 10 years before we lost him. But I was at a con with him, and we were W and Z. We were at the same table. It was a small con. We were at the same table for autographs. And I had autographed every copy of my book in existence, and he had autographed maybe 0.001% of all of his books in existence, which meant that he'd autographed maybe 9 times as many books as I had that day. But we're sitting there, and this was shortly after Path of the Fury had come out. And it's a hiatus. He looked at me and said, "I finished Path of the Fury last night." I was, oh my God, Roger Zelazny read my book. Oh crap. I thought, so what did you think of it? And he said, and it is one of the high points of my writing career. He said, "I think it may be the best blend of hard science and fantasy I've ever read." Okay. From Roger Zelazny, that meant a lot. But it didn't stop there, because my 78 Volvo had swallowed the timing gears right outside Fredericksburg, which is where the con was. And it had to be towed in. And fortunately, they were nylon. They didn't do a whole lot of damage, but they had to fire up an assembly line in Sweden that had been, mothballed for 10 years to make the parts. And then they had to ship them across the ocean by windjammers. So I wound up in Lynchburg for 13 days waiting to get the car fixed. I was the house guest of Jane Linskuld's. And Roger was there for like another 4 days before he had to leave. He was also staying with Jane. So I will never forget this thunderstorm. We're sitting on the back porch of Jane's house, which was built before the Civil War. And there's the tin roof over the porch. There's the rain pounding down on it. There's thunder rumbling and cracking, the occasional lightning bolt. And we're sitting there with beers in our hands and our bare feet shoved out under the water coming off the roof. And we're talking books. And he was talking to me as if I'd written 30 or he'd only written 5. It was that level of, members of the fraternity, members of the, and I try really, really hard to bear that example in mind when I'm talking to an author who is just really starting out. There are a lot worse role models that you could have. And I also have to say that, people come up to me and say, oh, I love your books. And I find myself trying to look over my shoulder at which of the authors I loved they're really talking to. Okay. I mean, it's what I do. I am really deeply involved in it. It is satisfying. It's all those things. But I've never understood the arrogance of creativity. All right, I've seen it. I see it especially, I think, out of Hollywood a lot. You see it in the music industry, and you see it in writing. The people who are, I know who I am, and I haven't met you. Have we been properly introduced? I mean, that kind of attitude. I just like, now I have to say that I love Fred Saberhagen. I loved him. Fred was much quieter than anybody who never met him would believe. Okay. I was at LibertyCon many, many years ago. So I think it was LibertyCon number 10, because they'd invited all their previous guests of honor back. And I think Fred was the guest of honor at the very first LibertyCon in Chattanooga. I'd have to check to be sure, but he was definitely in the first 10. So I'm down at Con Ops Saturday morning. And somebody comes and says, "Oh my God, it's awful." And they're like, "What?" And he said, "Well, it's meet the author, Fred Saberhagen. He's in there. There's all these people sitting in the panel room, and he hasn't said a word, and nobody said a word." And I said, "Did anybody introduce him?" And he said, my God, it's Fred Saberhagen. And I said, oh, you fool. So I went down, I opened the door and I stepped in and I said, it's come to my attention that nobody's talking to anybody here. Okay, allow me. Fans, Fred Saberhagen. Fred, fans, talk to each other, and left. Okay, and Joan Saberhagen grabbed me later. She said, "Oh, thank you, thank you." He'd have sat there for the entire hour without that. And I was like, "Yeah, that's the kind of moment that I treasure, that writing the books has brought to me." I mean, I treasure the moments when fans come up to me and they tell me how much the characters mean to them, that kind of thing. I've had people come up to me and tell me that my books have saved their lives because they were in a really dark place and they were reading the books. And I'm like, I am so incredibly grateful the books were there for you and they had that effect. I don't deserve the credit of saving your life, because if those books said anything to you, it was because what they were saying was already inside you and you just hadn't realized it. I cannot write a scene that will make you feel something that isn't already consistent with you. Okay, I can introduce you to ideas that you probably wouldn't have entertained because of ideological or religious or whatever. And if I put the idea into the head of a character who you've come to know and respect and love, and do it in a way that makes it rational, I can make that idea or concept more accessible to you. Okay, that maybe. That's not why I write the books, but that I could see happening. But I can't make you feel outrage or courage or whatever if the elements of that are not already in you before you ever read the book. It's a collaboration between me and you. Honor Harrington is a different person to anybody who's ever read an Honor Harrington novel, because she's who they met from the background of their life experience and how their life experience played into their understanding of her life experience. So I know exactly who Honor Harrington is, and I also know that she's not that person exactly to anybody else who's ever read one of the books. And I think that as a creator, as a writer, you have to be able to bear that in mind, so that if somebody comes up to you and says something that is totally off the wall about a character's motivation or where they went or something, you have to stop and say, well, now, why would they believe that? And then kind of run through the process from there. And there have been a couple of times when a reader has explained to me why two characters did something, and it turns out they have a better idea of why those two characters did something than I did when I wrote the scene. And frequently I discover that what they're telling me was there at the very back of my brain and just hadn't made it to the front. Okay, that's one of the moments when a writer goes, oh, you have really connected with my story, to the person who you're having the conversation with. And it's actually, even when you don't agree with them at the end as to why they think the character did something, it's still gratifying because the character did what they thought they did because the character was a real person. And that real person didn't take the same stimuli from the scene that you'd set up that the person you had envisioned did. Okay. I always intended to teach history and write on the side. And because of the demographics in the field about the time I was finishing my master's thesis, in particular the fact that over half of the tenured positions were held by people who were 42 or younger, I decided that probably rather than spending 10, 15 years bouncing around till I finally got tenure somewhere, that I would go down, I would take over my mom's little PR thing and see about writing. Okay. It wasn't that clear-cut a decision. It wasn't until Steve White and I started on what eventually became Insurrection I'd already submitted one novel before we did Insurrection. It was what eventually became The Sword of the South and was rejected by now it wasn't Ballantine. Who was it? Del Rey. And that actually, Sword of the South is the first full-length novel I ever wrote. And I was very gratified when it finally found print and got the reception that it did. Unfortunately, I now have to figure out how to find time to write the sequels, but that's what Maurice is for. She's my backstop. If I don't get to it, here you go, Maurice, you got 5 to go, have fun, knock yourself out. But you have to make choices. I think I've said that already today. And if I had decided to stay in the classroom, and I was good in the classroom, I really was. But if I decided to stay, then Honor Harrington probably would never have been written and certainly never have attained the number of books and the number of readers that she has. So, you have if you're not willing to drop the dime and make the decision, make the choice, then the road not taken becomes the road abandoned rather than the road not taken. My son Michael was going back and forth over re-upping in the Marine Corps. Part of him wanted to, but the minimum contract now is 2 years. So he couldn't re-up for 1 year like his uncle had done a couple of times. And he was like, I don't know, this and that. And I said, Michael, the thing you have to understand is whichever decision you make, you're going to have things to regret. Okay. What you have to look at here is what you want to not regret most. And he did decide to re-up. Now I'm very proud of him. One of the reasons that he gave me in a conversation that we had a couple 4 months before he had to make the decision was he was saying, that was at the point at which he thought he could re-up for a single year. Okay. And he was like, I'm really thinking about re-upping for a year, they'll give me E5. And he said, I really had a bad senior NCO in my first assignment, which was one of our 2 diplomatic offices in Jerusalem. It was the one that Trump had closed and Biden had reopened, so it was secondary to the embassy. It wasn't the official embassy. And he said, that I had really weak leadership. And he said, newbies need good NCOs. And I was like, you know what? I've been proud of this young man a lot, but I'm really proud of him over that. Okay.
Well, now he's going to become one and show
Yeah.
what a really good NCO is.
Yeah.
That's the whole.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and okay. His sister Megan, our twin daughters, for those who don't know this, are adopted from Cambodia and are only 14 months older than he is. We went from 0 to 3 in 4 weeks and 2 days. It was kind of like having triplets, but he was 1 month old and they were 15 months old when I brought him back. Anyway, Megan got married June the 13th, and a couple of weeks before that, she commissioned as a second lieutenant in the National Guard, which means that when they're in uniform, Michael's going to have to salute her. Okay. Now, if he'd been available, I guarantee you who she would have wanted to take her first salute from. There's no question in my mind. The other possibility would have been her uncle, Mike, who was in for 22 years, but who is no longer quite as mobile as he was. And this was going to be outside, hot sunlight, the whole 9 yards. She wanted him there, but she didn't want to stress him in the ceremony. So she took the first salute from a sergeant in her unit who is also a cop she's a sheriff's deputy in the same county as the university that Megan graduated from. But I'm proud of both of them. But there's my picture on my Facebook. I haven't been on Facebook very much at all in the last year or so, and that's partly because of everything that's going on here, and if you go and you look at my personal Facebook page, you see a picture of me and Michael on the parade ground at Paris Island right after his graduation from basic. And the reason that picture is up there is it is the first picture of the two of us ever taken where my head is on his shoulder. Okay. And I don't know what Sharon and I did right. Okay. But now Sharon and I don't understand why some of the things that happened to us, but I figured it out. Okay. In a previous carnation, she was Elizabeth de Barthoy, and I was Genghis Khan, and the bad karma department lost our addresses for like 4 generations. So the accrued interest explains exactly what's been happening to us. She's like, I don't drink blood, I'm like, no, she took baths in it. Okay, I don't take baths in it either. Yeah. And I said, not now. Yeah. But it's just, it keeps life from being boring. Okay. But there are moments at which boring is good.
Yeah.
All right. Moments like, yes, we will. The guy who is running the general contractor on the repairs, the previous guy who was the general running the repairs, as Joel put it, is no longer with the company, and there was no severance pay involved. Yes. So Joel wants to rehire him so that he can fire him. The permits on the repairs expired before they got any work done at all out here. That's how this has gone. And part of it is understandable when you look at how many people got hammered so much worse. Our house was basically, except for this one little leak in the roof, which if they had fixed it, would not have led to the black mold, would not have led to the ceiling damage, would not have led to the testing the black mold, which would not have led to finding the asbestos, which it would not have led to $32,000 more for asbestos abatement, and me sitting here in a house that has no central air. But I digress. But he's also kind of irked with the estimator who was sent out by his company, because when he handed his detailed estimate over to Nationwide, who have been really good through all this, there was no reference to the sunroom that was going to have to be repaired. And so I called him and I said, why didn't you say anything about the sunroom? This was like 2.5 months after the hurricane. Okay, he says, well, we don't do sunrooms. And I said, it would have been really nice if you'd told me that, because now I have to go and find somebody to do sunrooms. And that added 2 months to where we were. And then the sunroom work went very slowly for a lot of reasons. But anyway, so I was talking to Joel about that. He says, man, he's a wonderful, nice guy. He's retired now, but I really want to go strangle him, because of course we do sunrooms. We just don't call them that. If you had wanted a room under the second deck that we were going to have to replace anyway, I'd have built that puppy for you stick and mortar. It would have been done in 3 weeks, and we could have been out of your hair. And I'm like,
I'm surprised you got a contractor that can build anything in 3 weeks.
Yeah, well, when they actually got started on the decks out here, Tom has seen the deck system. There's a second level deck right outside we're in an A-frame, modified A-frame. Okay, and there's a second level deck, and the sunroom is under the deck. Okay, Tom, they built the entire upper deck, including the railing, 2 days. Okay, and Tom had seen the work that they were doing on the lower deck here when he came to pick me up. Well, he drove over here, and we drove down to LibertyCon together. Yeah. The two of us and Jamie and Michelle Ibsen, and he's like, they were digging post holes. Okay. And we got a picture that was sent to us. It's like the deck is 3/4 done already. Sharon had sent it to us. We got back and it was still pretty much where it had been. So I asked Joel what had happened, and he said, well, when we hit the tie-in point on the existing deck, we found a lot of rotten timbers. So we had to stop and get the materials we needed to replace the rotten timbers. And they did that, and they came back, and except for the railing around the deck, it's completely done now, Tom.
Great.
It's finished.
Okay. Just have to paint it then, and they're good.
Well, it has to sit for a couple of months before they paint it because it's
Okay.
pressurized wood. But until they put the railing up, I can't bring the dogs home, who have been boarded since last September. They're going on like 9 months of being boarded. And at least our senior dog is apparently getting some kennel stress. That is, but I can't bring them home till I have a fenced in area where I can let them go out to be dogs. So what's probably going to happen is that I'm going to be living in the house on the ground floor with the dogs back from the kennel, and moving their crates into the sunroom from upstairs while they start putting the entirely gutted kitchen back together again. And that's probably, they're saying, going to take about 6 weeks to get everything done up there. So Sharon's probably going to be stuck in the efficiency apartment in the hotel, the Residence Inn that they moved her into all that time. And I would like meet her for lunch, and say, how's your day going, kind of thing, while staying over here so the house isn't empty at night, and the boys and Artemis can come home from the kennel. But it's looking at the speed that Joel's crews are working at, Tom. If Joel had been in charge, and if IDC had said, yes, we can build it stick and mortar for you, you don't need to get somebody else involved, we would have been up and running, repairs done probably within 6 to 7 months of the hurricane. And we're now closing in on 24. And that's just, I told Sharon, Elizabeth should not have murdered that last virgin. This is because you did that. Okay. And she's like, I was not. She says, she wasn't even a ginger. And so I went and found a picture of her. And you can't quite tell because she's got this hairnet on, but it could be a ginger. But yeah, it's, it's, may you live in interesting times. Okay. The country as a whole has been doing it for the last 10 years or so.
10 years, yeah.
And we're a microcosm of really
a little too interesting, unfortunately.
Yes.
Any final words for the audience, David and Thomas?
Well, Tom should have some words. I've had lots of words.
To a certain degree, it's just, we're pushing forward as much as we can. We've got a lot of stories we want to tell, a lot of things to do. Call to Deception is the first of many, and I don't intend to slow down. And now that I've gotten myself settled here, I'm finding it's a lot easier to do the work that I need to do, and so I'm looking forward to the year ahead.
In a lot of ways, Tom and I are both, or I will be shortly, in much better work environments than we were. Especially when you have to be able to think creatively rather than just being so worn out that it's like it. You have to be able to do the writing even when it's a chore, but when the writing becomes only a chore, then you're not going to get the work done. Okay. And I've been to the point where, because of everything else going on in my life, the writing had become only a chore with brief intervals. For example, the story that I did for Challenges, it came together very quickly, very easily. I think it's one of the best short pieces of fiction that I've ever written. And it was a huge reassurance when I got done with it and said, you know what, that's actually pretty good, because of where I'd been on the writing. I wrote, I meant to ask you, Tom, I had a 2-day loophole in getting the next chunk that I needed to work on from Tom. He had this day job that had him in places like Washington, D.C., and things like that there.
They occasionally expect things of me, yes.
Yes, yeah, what can I say? How unreasonable of them. But anyway, I had done the intro chapter to the next Star Kingdom book with Jane Lindskold out of it. And I meant to ask you, Tom, did that work for you?
Yes. There's a couple of things that I want to discuss, and I still have some of your notes from before. Like, Tom, remind me of this before we start the book. So I'll send those along. Remind me of this, just so we can weave them in.
Yeah.
But yeah, I was looking at that. I was looking at the maps that I'd made of Sphinx that you and Jane and I had talked through a little bit.
Yeah.
That we'll want to clean up a little bit for the book. But yeah,
the last YA, Friends Indeed, was darker in some ways than any of the earlier books that we've done. It dealt specifically with abusive childhoods. It dealt with the defensive use of lethal force and some other issues. This one is going to be even darker in some ways.
And it started out that way.
Yep. Yeah, it did, didn't it?
It didn't take you long.
No, jump right in there. There'll be some very satisfying moments in it as well. And one thing, Tom, that Jane and I are still talking about is where Duncan ends up. I have some thoughts on that I want to bounce off you that I've already bounced off of her. Yeah, it's like I say, better to have too much to do and not enough time to do it in, but you do still have to find the time. All right. And I think I'm going to be in a much better place to do that going forward. Probably the 6th, my IT guy is coming down from Southern Virginia, and he's going to move my computers and everything in my new standing or sitting desk into the sunroom. And I will be able to close the sunroom door while they're hammering and banging upstairs and whatnot. I'll have the dogs home. I think it will be a much calmer writing environment, and I expect to pick up speed. Back in the day, I did 750,000 words a year. Okay. The most I ever did in a single session was 32,000 words, and then I went and slept for 2 days. That was how I wrote when I was younger. Okay. I can't do that anymore. I'm doing well to get 3,000 to 4,000, maybe 5 on a day when things are moving the way they should move. And that's part of the problem, is the days when I can devote the time to get the 5,000 words that in an earlier iteration of me would have been 10,000 words. Okay, so I'm being less productive and when I actually write. Okay, and finding the intervals in which I can write has been a problem as well. And I think that at least will get better, knock on wood, in the next week or so. And then, Tom, I think we may be able to move much more quickly through the last of what we owe Tim. Poor Tim is sitting there waiting for us to get back to him. Yeah. And I'm pretty sure that if there's a contract he ever regretted taking, it's probably this one. And I do not blame him one bit.
No, he's been very patient with us.
Yes, he has. I think part of the patience is he says, Tony knows who to blame. He needs no protestations of innocence because she knows me. She knows Tom. All right. And I guess that's not exactly a summation, but I think it might be a decent end point.
Yeah, you're going to speed up. Everything's fallen into place, and you will deliver the book.
You had to say it out loud. You had to say it out loud.
Okay, I'm just concretizing it.
The department was listening. Okay, but yes, that is the game plan, and what I think is going to happen. Okay, Tom and I were having a little bit of discussion earlier this morning before the interview, and I think, Tom, that we are going to go ahead and do it the way that you were talking about.
I haven't convinced myself otherwise yet, and I don't think I will.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and Tim gave us the option of 2 different ways to go at that point. So it's not like we're going to be saying, Tim, we added so much to your book, we can't still fit this in. It'll be like, Tim, we added enough to your book that we decided we were going to fit this in. Poor Tim. I'm just like, it's stuck with us. Okay, Anyway, that's where we are. And as long as God wasn't listening when you opened your mouth and said all of that, it'll probably happen.
All right. Well, thank you both. People should, if they haven't even looked at the series, all the Honorverse and the rest of your books, they absolutely should. And,
Well, let me say one other thing before we go. If you want the full Honorverse story, okay, you can't do it just reading the mainline books. Okay, the anthologies, the Shadow books, the Crown of Slave books, they're all integral, and there are events that happen in those books that you need to know about to fully appreciate what's happening in the main arc books. And the best reading order is the publication order, because that's the way I structured the series when I was writing it. So even if the next book is not in the direct series, you should go read it before you read the next one in the series, because it's very probably, almost certainly, going to make what you're reading make more sense and give you a fuller picture of what's going on. That's the one problem with having subseries, or what people perceive as subseries. I really don't perceive them as subseries. They're marketed as such, but I perceive them as all part of one series that is multi-lobed. Okay, so just thought I would mention that. It's not just a bid to sell more books, although I will not object should it do so.
None of us will.
But it is the author telling you the order in which he envisioned the books being read. And my observation has been that usually the author has a better idea of what order to read the books in than somebody who hasn't yet read them. Call me crazy.
100%. 100%.
Okay.
All right. Thank you both. And going to look forward to talking with you again soon.
Thanks you.
Sounds good. Thank you.
And now, as promised, one jump ahead. John Moore is a nanotech-enhanced soldier of fortune. Lobo is an AI, a living weapons and intelligence platform of enormous destructive potential. 2 very dangerous wolves in a galaxy of deadly corporate and paramilitary predators. But Moore has grown weary of the killing, and just once he'd like to finish a job without leaving a trail of blood behind him. Not going to happen. Not on a pristine planet called Macon, where 2 gigantic corporations vie for control of the local jump gate and access to the riches of an undeveloped world. Dealing with a kidnapping and extortion scheme is only the beginning for Moore and Lobo as they work to stay one jump ahead.
Hit a nerve I didn't know I still had. I'd worked hard to earn the stripes I once wore, and not having them on my sleeves made me feel I'd lost ground. The uniform was necessary, however, because by working as a crewman on the Hazlett, the largest of the SAW's materiel carriers stationed near Lankin, I attracted no attention from the Kelco and Zychek security people who we had to assume were monitoring the SAW launch facility. The well-leaked breakdown of the smaller personnel carriers covered our use of the Hazlett for the R&R run to Macon. Lobo rode inside the shell of a large dirt mover the SAW was delivering for the FC. Bob's tank sat inside Lobo, and Bob swam to and fro in his tank. The ray in the tank, in the PCAV, in the mover, in the transport. It struck me as a chain of key words from the sort of children's story Earl might make up for his kids, if he could ever bring himself to have children, and if he could overcome his reaction to what Bob and the tank had cost. Gustafson would be sharing tales of that reaction, which I gathered had involved equal measures of amazement and obscenity with other non-coms over drinks for years to come. I had to hand it to Earl, though. He was a resourceful manager. He was already getting back some of the mission's cost by transporting the dirt mover for the FC, which he'd convinced to pay secure cargo rates on the grounds that anything as powerful as the dirt mover was a potential weapon. The huge mechanical beast was hollow now, its main chassis a shell hiding Lobo, but once we hit Mackin and smuggled Lobo out of it, some of the vacationing saw troops who were actually transport mechanics would reassemble the giant construction machine. As we closed on the Lankin Gate, I made my way to a private viewing lounge for a better look. The Hathai shared the spare design, emphasis on functionality, and drab gray color of every saw transport I'd ever ridden. Stay in any one area, and you'd have no way to tell if you were on a platoon shuttle or a major freight hauler. The 5-meter-wide window in the viewing lounge was a rare exception, added, I'd heard, to appease the FC dignitaries the saw had to transport from time to time. Though Hathai was huge, she wasn't slow. In the few minutes I stood in the lounge, the Lankin Gate grew from a purple speck barely visible in the distance to an enormous pretzel of grape-colored aperture frames and connective pieces. The whole gate, a humbling construct reeking of otherness. Gustafson appeared at my shoulder. "Always amazing, aren't they?" he said. "Yeah," I said. "I never tire of looking at the gates. They're like the oceans or the forests on a new planet before any of us arrive to mess them up. Inhuman yet usable by humans, awe-inspiring, somehow beyond us." I thought about the unspoiled beaches of Mackin and the construction happening along them. Too bad no ocean or forest ever proves to be beyond us for long. Give us enough time and let enough of us go after it, and we can shape, mold, change, or destroy anything nature can create. "Except the gates," he said. "Except the gates." I turned to look at him. Of course, we don't know if nature created them. "Don't tell me you're a gatist," he said. "Do I need to leave you alone to worship?" I laughed. Hardly. I don't have any idea whether some god or nature or even aliens we've never found created the gates, and for the most part, I don't care. What matters most to me is that they are, and they work, in the same way that the rest of the universe exists and works. It does, and that's good enough for me. We both stared again at the parts of the gate we could see. We were far too close now to be able to make out the whole thing. Each twist in the pretzel was thicker than Lobo was long, and most of the apertures dwarfed even the ships of Hathai's size. I couldn't tell the Mackin aperture from any of the others, but when we settled into line behind a small Kelco transport, it was clear we were on our final trajectory toward the gate. Intellectually, I understood that we were moving under control. Gravity systems working, everything smooth, but for an instant I felt almost as if I were falling through the gate into Mackin, into conflict, into whatever that conflict would bring. Once you've been on a few missions, you realize that no matter how well you plan, you're never in total control. "Can you remember," I said, "how you thought it would be when you first signed on, before you'd actually been in the field?" "Of course," he said. "I make it a practice to remember my stupidest moments, so I can avoid repeating them." "And then you go on the mission, and if you're lucky enough to make it back, you learn the truth," I said. "Or at least, you learn the truth of your own experience and reactions." "Or you die," he said. "Or you go crazier than the rest of us because you can't find any other way to cope." I nodded and waved my hand at the aperture growing before us. "Yet, here we are again," I said. "Yeah, here we are." Gustafson clapped me on the back and headed out.
This has been the Bane Free Radio Hour. Thanks for joining us at the heart of science fiction. Join us next week as Griffin Barber interviews Shammy Stovall on 1/5 Dragon, her new Bane novel. And we go further with One Jump Ahead by Mark L. Van Dame, Part 75. Score by Ruth Judkowitz.